Hello and welcome to Series 3 of my podcast Innervation, where we get to hear stories and experiences of incredible women from diverse backgrounds and perspectives in science and technology. Our conversations give us insights into some fascinating innovations, but we also get to relate. Here on Innervation, I give women a platform to be seen and heard, because this exact conversation is also in video format on YouTube. And honestly, every single episode is inspiring and uplifting, because we hear about what these women have learned along their life's journeys, both personally and professionally. This week, I talked to Chinta Dissanayake, a psychologist.
My name is Chinta Dissanayake. I'm a psychologist. And a psychologist that works with different organizations. So basically an organizational psychologist. And I've been working here in Europe and in Asia for over 20 years now.
We go back a long, long way because our relatives know each other. And I think I must have met you decades ago, and we haven't seen each other since. So this is a very special conversation where, as two fellow Sri Lankan women, we get to catch up on all the years that we haven't seen each other, but also find out about our experiences as women in STEM. So first of all, your line of work as a psychologist, in terms of like STEM training, what have you had to do to get to where you are today?
Okay. Well, I came through an interesting route, Sheeny, because basically I started off with a biology degree. So I'm a biology graduate from King's College in London. But then as I graduated from King's College, the biology degree, the psychology part of it didn't really encompass enough for me to be a graduate member of the British Psychological Society, which one must be to engage in any kind of work within psychology. So this really lovely tutor, Bob Farrer, I'm going to plug his name here. Amazing guy. He basically suggested that I went and did a top-up course at City University. So then from there on, now I could officially call myself a graduate of, a psychology graduate of the British Psychological Society. And then from there on, I kind of didn't look back. I did a master's course in applied psychology at Cranfield University, which is very much, Cranfield University is an incredible place, and I'm really grateful to have had that opportunity to be there, because it put psychology on a very practical level and how you apply in the world. So basically, there were things like, how do people behave in an air crash, for example. Yeah. So they actually had a real Boeing aeroplane in the backyard there, where all these experiments would be done, and human behavior within a crisis situation. Yeah. So that was part of some of the work that we did. And then driver behavior. Yeah. So why do people behave in a certain way on a road, on a motorway? And can the motorway or the road be designed in a way that mitigates that behavior? Yeah, because we behave in the way we do because just we do that. It's very difficult to control us, from within. But what we can do is maybe set up systems in place that allows us to behave in a different way. Okay, so similarly, so a lot of the stuff that you hear and then you mostly ignore when you go on holiday and you sit in your seat, the aircraft safety information, that is based a lot on a lot of research, the way that they explain it, and even the seating arrangement, how it's done, etc. The lighting on the ground, that was relatively new, that came out of Cranfield, I believe, because we were doing research there on that. So it's like the man-machine interaction. It's a part of that. And then moving on from there, how we design workplaces so that It allows the people who are working within that to give their best. So anyway, so that was what it was, and that was what my PhD was in the end. Somewhere in between that, I went and got a job in the prison service. Yeah, Her Majesty's Prison Service, and then I started for a little while working as a prison psychologist. And okay, so academically, I was learning a lot of things in psychology, but in terms of human behavior, human predicament, human, what society does to people was actually learned within the prison context. I spent 2 years there. It was a young offender institute. And there I left in the end because it felt like maybe there was something that I could do to help young people before they get to that point. Yeah, because the system is stacked against them. It's not okay. All right, because even if they do come out, I mean, these are young people, and it's very difficult for them to get back on track.
It's so incredible to hear that you were at Cranfield, because I have been to Cranfield so many times because they have such a strong engineering faculty. Very, very practical. I was there recently looking at the hydrogen aircraft technology that they're developing at the moment. So it's really interesting to see, as you mentioned, this cross-pollination. Your expertise with expertise in engineering and the psychology behind that. It's all very well designing engines and all these kinds of like big mechanical parts, but the idea that we also have a psychology around it. How do we behave when we're driving? How do we behave if a machine fails, like an aircraft? It's really incredible, the idea of, and I think it really highlights the importance of all the different perspectives in STEM coming together to make something really great. What do you do now?
For me, if you have an education, I remember my mother used to say, what, life can put anything in front of you and it can completely put you on your knees. You could be there standing on your knees without even the clothes on your back. But if you have an education, you can dust yourself off, and get up and start again. And for me, that was that's a big deal. And I think if you can give at least as many kids that opportunity, then I think it's important.
Because you also mentioned the Sri Lankan angle, and I really, something that struck me so deeply about what you were saying was like parental expectation. So why don't we start with that? Because actually, that's something I really relate to. The other day, I was in Manchester doing an awards ceremony, and the CEO of the whole sort of initiative said to me, I watched your TED talk, and it's really clear that you have a very dominating father. And that really shocked me, because my TED talk, it's available for public consumption, obviously, being a TED talk. But I never thought that I mentioned my dad in a way that made him look dominating. But that must be a really maybe Sri Lankan thing, because, my dad always pushed the importance of engineering. So when you were talking about sort of being on your knees and not knowing which way to turn, but education being the one thing that you can really rely on to pull you out of any, compromising situation, that was a message that was really drummed into my head. Dad's always talked about the importance of engineering and the importance of education. For the purpose of this podcast, do you think that we are educating our younger generations correctly in the UK? Because I know that we have a Sri Lankan sort of like upbringing, and education was probably key. Okay, let's try and keep this simple. How important was education for you growing up?
Very important.
Same with me. Do you think we are doing education right by our young today in the UK?
No, simply not. And I think for that, we've got to respect the teaching profession, for starters, who are at the top end of all this. I think there's very little respect and investment for teachers, because they really are the people who are turning the little key, to help young people discover more about themselves. And I think that is a part of it.
How can we change things?
I think, again, we go back to systems, really, isn't it? Operating systems, going back to Cranfield, and how making sure that, we have a system that's an aeroplane that people can get out of. If there was a danger, or, whilst they're in there, it's comfortable and properly designed. So I think it's designing systems that is probably at fault here. Because, one of the more disappointing things for me really is that, education and health, which are very emotive subjects, are pulled out by various politicians. I mean, I don't want to go into politics here because I think it's not the space for it. But the thing is, people keep changing it all the time, all right? And each one wants to make a difference, in this way or that way, but without possibly thinking of the long-term effect of it. Yeah, because it's emotive, really, isn't it? Yeah, it's an emotive subject, so people will stop and listen the minute you start talking about schools or health, because it applies to everyone. Education if you have young kids, and health if you've got older people. So that's 100% of the population. Yeah.
When you talked about people knowing their passion, that really struck a chord with me as well, because I remember being absolutely focused on getting engineering qualifications, because that's what my dad had, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps as the eldest daughter. And so I never took my blinkers off. I just went forward trying to get my qualifications in engineering. And then when I popped out of university and I had all these impressive qualifications, I had absolutely no clue what my passions were, because I was so focused on just getting qualified. And I remember having conversations with people in media, like the BBC, and they would ask me questions like, what are your passions? How can we design a television program around your passions? What is it you want to do in life? And, I qualified at the age of 24, like I was done with my education at 24, but I had no clue about what was truly driving me. And it really put me into a panic, because I was like, I have no clue what I want to do with my life, with my brains, with my skills. I don't even know what my skills are. I just know how to study really well. And it really, really made me panic. And I just wonder whether, in your experience, young people have that same panic, that they don't have all the answers to their lifetime plan in their 20s or even in their late teens.
Indeed. Yeah. So when I was running those programs, like the first year was finding out about yourself and so on, really, I had to work with the parents as well. Okay. And one of the strict, you had to do it in a gentle way, because, I mean, the parents are paying me, right? So you can't really annoy them too much, but guiding them gently, into this process, and asking them to not over direct the child's free time. Yeah, can you allow them? So part of the program was to discover, what is it that I really like. Yeah, go try experimenting with some stuff. So in the group, some people will come and tell you about what they're doing and so on. So then somebody else said, oh, I'd like to do that, I'll give that a shot, and so on. So it's really important to not orchestrate our kids' free time too much. I know parents who will basically exhaust their kids up until it's bedtime, and then wonder why these kids are so buzzed and they can't get to sleep at night, because it's just completely going from piano to judo to this to that the after school activities are there. So when I've got 2 kids, now they're grown up, and basically they could do one thing only in a week, and then the rest of it they had to, I don't know, and then they will come and say, I'm bored. And then, but they never say they're bored anymore. Okay. But anyway, they used to say, when I'm bored, I said, oh, congratulations, darling. I say, And I said, you know what? You're just on the verge of doing something really interesting. So carry on.
This inability to follow one's true purpose comes out sideways in other ways. Has that been your experience?
I think so. I think the key part of it is when kids do the stuff, in this, I like the beautiful imagery of the unfurling of yourself. Okay. When they're doing that, it doesn't mean that they are not going to do what it is that they might end up doing in the end. Okay, but they get the confidence to do that.
Yes.
And that's the difference, because by trying and failing on things is where we learn. We don't really learn from our successes, to be honest, right? We learn from the things that we don't quite succeed. It's not even a failure. I hate to label it as being a failure. It didn't turn out the way that we wanted it to turn out. And that's all it is. So then you try a different way and so on, really. So when you leave a kid to try out something, whether it be coloring or whatever, they'll think, they're their own worst critic, okay, in the end, because they will think that's not quite what I wanted. All right. And then they will start improving on things. So even with their little mini projects or whatever it is, and so on, and kids to start comparing each other. But if they start not quite, like honing their skills is the way to put it. Early on,
and allowing themselves to be themselves, rather than, and this is probably why the educational system is so challenged, because everyone's being siphoned through the same channel instead of people getting to the answer in their own way.
Yes.
I mean, this is what really worries me. But I think you're mentioning vocabulary that strikes me so deeply, because confidence is so crucial. And it's the reason why I started this podcast, because the women that I have on this podcast are brilliant in terms of qualifications and experience and, being in industry, etc. But some of them have really had to struggle with their own belief systems, their inner belief systems. And it sounds like the way you've raised your own children has just been so healthy. And I'm so drawn to the way parents raise their children, because it's not just about going to the best universities or getting the best qualifications, which can often be the motivation behind parents who are underrepresented themselves. So, for example, my parents are, as you know, like Sri Lankan. We were very underrepresented. And so my dad pushed that message, get an education. It's the only way to gain respect from your community and, to really elevate yourself through education. But that really, I followed those instructions, but to me, it hasn't necessarily been the qualifications that have been key. It's what I believe about myself that has been key. And that's been a really, really difficult journey, because it's not something that education can help with. It's the side of things that is to do with love, encouragement, support. It's very touchy-feely stuff, which in STEM industries generally, particularly engineering, is not discussed at all. So what light can you shed on this kind of touchy-feely aspect of a child's development, knowing that I'm asking that question, having been immersed in a very masculine, very sort of like logic, head-driven past, basically? What light can you shed?
I think, it's a very interesting question, and the answer is probably not going to be that simple in terms of it's not a yes or no simple answer. But I think as women, we are going into STEM, we can lead by example. Yeah, we can change the way that we handle ourselves. And in doing so, teach boys and girls, men and women in the world that we're encountering, that softness does not mean weakness. Okay, gentleness does not mean that you're giving in or anything like that. Because I think that is truly where the strength lies. Because that is how you can mobilize a whole bunch of people, into doing something that is going to be, flying to the moon or whatever it is. Hard forms of communication. It's fine, if you're dealing with robots, but the point is, we're dealing with human beings, who genuinely, at the end of the day, just simply want to be accepted and respected, and feel that they are giving a part of themselves, to the world. That includes their talents, and their skills and so on, really. Yeah, and then feeling that there's a space for that. Yeah, if we have to hide part of it, then we are like those chickens that. I don't know this is kind of a bit graphic, but I don't know whether you notice, but the hen keeps rotating the chicken when it's sitting on an egg. Yeah, every I don't know, half an hour or so, it rotates all the eggs. That's because the warmth has to be all around to create a chicken that can truly fly or truly do whatever it is. Any bird, it doesn't have to be a chicken, okay, any bird. Because if you don't, the warmth will only be on one side, and that's the part that really hatches, or becomes elongated and so on. Yeah, it take my word for it, that happens, but the mother hen, she keeps rotating it, or maybe, there are some fathers as well, okay, there are partners who keep the eggs warm, but they keep rotating it, because it's really important that all sides of the human being or the bird or the entity are in full capacity and can actually come together, because it is only when all come together you see the true flight, the beautiful flight of bird. Otherwise it's always just crawling around, or one wing not there or something like that. But I think we need all of us, when we come to anywhere, what you're doing here or what I'm doing here, because at the end of the day, my knowledge is only the stuff that's in my bag, that I pick up. But it's me that walks into these organizations or any kind of encounter, and that's all of me that's walking in. And you need to have that confidence to walk in, because anything else you do with it is just, it's just tools, right? It's just tools. But the real thing that we actually take in is us. And I think that's what we need to raise our kids to being. And some school systems are doing that. There are some amazing places that allow that. And I think we must acknowledge that too, and possibly learn from it so that we can extend it to other places too. But yeah, bring our whole selves in. I mean, I know there's a lot talked about that, but I think it's really important, because it's you and I that walk in that people will listen to, and anything else is just the knowledge and the tools that we can bring in to make sense of things. That's about it.
Well, Chinta, I feel like our conversation has really kind of projected into so many fundamental areas of life. You talked about education, you talked about Cranfield University, which really is such a key place for engineering, flight, aviation, aerospace. You talked about the prison service, you talked about youth, you talked about women, you talked about parenthood. You've just covered so much ground, confidence being such a key part of all of that. And even though this conversation has satellited into various different areas, I feel like there's just been such a massive common theme, which is the importance of knowing oneself and really making sure that you apply all of your dimensions to whatever it is that you're doing. And you help people to do that. And I feel like I didn't even realize, but I'm trying to do that too in my own way. And we're doing this in very separate spheres, but yet, it does all need to come together. And it has done in this conversation, even though I wish I could chat to you for several more hours. And I hope that we do off camera. But it's just been so enlightening to be able to speak to you today. And if anyone wants more information about what you do, or to see, more of your work, where would they go?
They can go to my website. It's oxfordpsychometrics.com, www. Maybe we can attach it somewhere at the bottom of the podcast or something. So that's where, and my email address is there. Reach out anytime. Seriously, Shini, you're doing a grand job in giving us a voice, really, and helping us to express it in a wonderful way that you clearly got a huge talent for. So thank you.
Thanks for listening, and please do subscribe to this podcast and maybe even rate and review it if you can. The more ratings and reviews, then the more interest from those trusty algorithms, which could help to increase the reach of this show. And you can watch the video recording of this conversation on YouTube on my new series called Esteemed. It's all about self-discovery, self-evolution, and inclusivity on innovation. Let's all strive to be in the best versions of ourselves and celebrate others being themselves too. As always, be kind and loving, and I wish you all a great week.